Welcome back. Today we're going to tie a pattern that I am not very good at. I'll just be completely honest with you there. I may have tied 2 in my lifetime, so that pretty much makes me an expert by today's standards, you know. So we'll struggle through it, but I'll be able to get you guys at least the basics. I had a request. Someone wrote me and said, hey, would you do a video on stimmy? I'll do one. It's like I said, not my best. It's not my strong suit by any means. May have tied 2 in my life, like I said, and fished maybe once as a kid for bass on the Juniata. But we'll get the basics down. But I like watching a bunch of different tires and everything. There's some phenomenal. You look at some of the folks out there, you know, on the Instagram world, or you know, I watch a bunch of YouTube videos as well, just different tires, different techniques. And there's some really talented folks out there. Suntal's one of them. You guys probably, his stuff's all over the place. He ties some beautiful stimulators. But not really my realm, but we'll get into it. I'll explain some of the background on it and, you know, what folks typically use it for as we get going. But to start, we've got a size 6. I think it's an Umpqua U203 is what we're using on this one. Probably on the bigger side of stimmies. Yeah, it's on the bigger side. Let me see here, where's my gel spun? So to start on this one, I'm just gonna get a thread base down and I'm gonna bring this back all the way past the barb of the hook. So I'm working on that downhill transition portion right there. All right. And then we're going to grab some Stimulator deer hair and we'll take a chunk of this. This is really fine deer hair. Really good stuff to work with too, so it's a good patch. So I'm just going to take this out. I want to bundle somewhere in a half a pencil width, I guess. I don't know, somewhere about that. And then I just want to clean that out, get rid of the under fur and everything. And then we're going to toss that in the stacker. Just even these tips up. That's pretty close. I could use a couple more on that. Wind's whipping out there again. It's whipping out there. So we'll get that off to the side and we'll make a judgment call on if that's too much or too little. I think that's a little bit too much. I want to take about a quarter of that out. There we go. That looks pretty good right there. And then I want to get that tied in. So I want to measure this out. A lot of times you'll see like a hook gap length for a tail. These tails are pretty stubby, to be honest with you. They're pretty stubby tails, so don't go tying them in real long, and then just get some nice loose wraps sitting on there. And then that's a little bit long, to be honest. It's not right. I'm going to back it off. Like I told you, I'm pretty much an expert on this, so this pattern is definitely not one that I have spent a lot of time with. But let's restack that. If it's not right, stop and go back and make it right. Stop and go back and make it right. So that looks better to me right there. So like I was saying earlier, a lot of folks will use these as a I'm trying to tie and think at the same time, not really working out. That looks better to me. A lot of folks use these as like an attractor pattern. Pretty easy pattern to, well, very easy pattern to see. And it's an easy pattern to tie as well. I mean, it's pretty simple. There's a lot of nuances to it, and then you can go just about any color combination out there. I've seen some folks tie them, you know, more as artwork than anything. They're tying like red, white, and blues and stuff like that. Really good looking stuff, but not something that you would necessarily fish a lot. Now, what a lot of folks do too is they'll use that as a use this as a hopper dropper setup. So they'll float some, you can float some pretty heavy nymphs and everything underneath this, as you can see with the amount of deer hair that we have in there. It's a very buoyant pattern. And then it'll also, depending on the color combinations that you tied in, it can pass for a stonefly. I see a lot of variations of this to where folks use it as a salmon fly imitation out here. So I'm running this up probably 3/4 of the way up, and then I just want to take and trim this right here, get rid of that excess. If you wanted to, you could take it the whole way up, but I kind of like having that little platform right there. And then that's going to differentiate my thorax. Well, that's going to tell me where my wing's at, and it's going to kind of give me a little ramp after I add the dubbing. It's going to give me a little ramp to add that stimulator wing. So that's looking pretty good. Probably a little heavy on the tail, to be honest with you. I probably could have cut that in half. I don't know. It looks all right. It looks all right. Like I said, I'm just giving folks the foundation here. I am by no means a subject matter expert on stimulators. I may have to take this one out and fish it though. Who knows? Let's see. I'm going to lengthen this out just for consistency purposes in the body. I want to lengthen this out. I'm going to take that wire the whole way up, and then this is going to be a counter wrap for my hackle. Come here, you. There we go. Flip that wire around and then tie that in. And then bring that right back to the tail. There we go. Right back to our tail section. I'll get that wire out of my way. And then what I'm going to do, I'm tying this one in orange today. This is a Sulphur dubbing, Superfine. You can use all sorts of different stuff for this body material. I mean, I've seen quill bodies, the synthetics, dubbing. Heck, I think I've even seen some folks tie them out of foam. Really, whatever you want to tie them with is up to you. Whatever's going to make your body the shape and profile that you want, have at it. But with this one today, I'm just going to go with a straight orange dubbing. Alright, so not heavy on the dubbing loop whatsoever, or on that dubbing rope. I don't want a real heavy, well, anytime you work with dubbing, anytime you work with Superfine, you're using as little as possible, and it's just a little bit more than that diameter of the of your thread. That one got a little squirrely on me, but if you watched some of Kelly's videos, he'll do a demonstration or how he picks his dubbing when he's doing dry fly bodies. Is he'll just drop it, and if it floats, it's just floating around up in the air, he'll be able to grab it. That's the right amount. If it drops to the table, that's too much. So that's a unique way of looking at, you know, picking dubbing and everything. A lot of folks that I watch when they're tying their flies, they have entirely too much dubbing on there, and what they wind up doing is something that, a mistake that I made when I was a kid. I would try to build my taper with the dubbing. the taper that you build is everything underneath the fly. Now with these stimulators, they're pretty consistent throughout. There's not a big taper like you'll see on mayfly bodies or anything like that. So with these stimmies, they're pretty consistent the whole way through. There's not like a big build-up section or an obvious taper or anything like that. It's pretty consistent. You can see how we're going with this one so far. That's pretty consistent throughout. The mayfly bodies, they're really skinny in the back, and then they get a little bit thicker. So when you're building that taper, you're not using the dubbing to get that taper. You're using your materials underneath. So you're like your wings, your tail, all of that stuff builds your taper, and then you use the same consistent amount of dubbing throughout. That way, one, you're gonna have less dubbing on there, your fly's gonna float better, and two, you're able to get consistency because you're building your taper with materials under your dubbing. It's going to be very inconsistent for you if you're trying to taper your dubbing on the noodle or on the rope, whichever term you refer to it as. So I'm just taking my time, I'm building this, I have consistency throughout. And then I'm going to take just a little bit more dubbing on this, and I'm going to finish this out. This should be enough. So just for reference here, just to check myself, this is what Kelly does. He just lets it go, and you can see it floating up there. It's floating. That's enough. That's the perfect amount right there for your dubbing. If you were to take, and you can see how easily that goes on to that rope for me. It's very consistent, and then the results are consistent when you're wrapping it on the hook. So I'm just going to take and fill that out. It's going to go a little bit further than what I wanted it, but that's all right. I got my point marked where I want to have that. And then, so say this is what you picked out and that's what you were going to throw on. You take that off and it drops straight to your table. Too much dubbing. Make sure that it's floating around if you're trying to figure out how much to use. That was one of the coolest things that I saw when, I can't remember if it was years ago when I was watching Kelly do that, and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense right there. Let me see here. So we're going to take a barred ginger on this one. And like I said before, I'm not getting too crazy about the colors or anything on that. I'm going to keep it pretty consistent, pretty basic, but feel free to do as much with these on the color as you like. I mean, like I said, there's some pretty wild stuff out there and some really cool stuff too. A lot of artistic people out there. I'm not much of one of them though. Alright, so we have our barred ginger tied in. Hackle pliers. If I were them, this is where I would be. Alright, and then I need to keep my hand out of there, so this is going to be a little difficult. And I don't like how that's... No. Nope. This isn't the best barred ginger that I have. Let me find another one here. Let me find another one. That was a little too long anyhow. A little too long. Probably would have been good for a front piece, but I like these, this back section here. I like that back section, well, in all of my experience tying these, I should say. When I'm looking at stimulators, I like the back section to have shorter hackle than my front section. Okay, so let me just get an eye on that. Yeah, I'm gonna like it. It's probably a little undersized, but I'm gonna go with it. And then I'll go with the heavier hackle or the longer hackle on the front portion of this fly. Alright, there we go. So then we're just going to set that in. This is a lot better of a piece right here. And I'm not even gonna risk trying to run that by hand all the way back. I'm just gonna use the rotary function. I'm gonna get my hand away from the camera, and then I'm just going nice consistent wraps all the way back. And this does two things. It gives you a lot of flotation, and then also it gives you a rib effect on that fly. So then we're going into our counter wrap portion. We're gonna catch that with our wire on the underneath side. We can release the pliers, and then my hand's out of the way again, and then same thing. I'm just working this straight through, and we're counter wrapping, hands in the way. We're counter wrapping that hackle all the way up. So there we go. Everything's clear right there. I got a piece of deer hair that's going rogue on me. We're gonna take and trim this, get that section out of there. There we go. And then grab our old scissors and then take this, trim off our counter wrap. So there you can see we have a really nice section of hackle right there. And I'm going to take on this top portion and just kind of trim that back to where that's where my deer hair, my overwing is going to be laying. There's all sorts of stuff you can do with this. If you want to add some flash to it, you can run some crystal flash back there prior to putting your wing on and everything. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do this as a standard standard stimmy. I'm not really going to flash it up too awful much, but if you want to, you could put some flash in there to go prior to putting your wing in. I got 2 dogs laying at my feet, 3 dogs laying at my feet. They're being really good today. They're nice and calm, relaxed. Maddie's down there snoring. I don't know if that's coming through the camera or not, but they're sure being well behaved. Alright, so now I want to just get this wing section. I want to stack those tips really nice. Everything's looking good right there. Get all of that fuzz out. Clean that out real nice. Some of those are a little on the short side. And then I'm going to take and I want to set that wing in. I got one hair that I don't really like there too much. Nice consistent wing. And then I'm taking that and I'm running these tips back to the midway point on that tail section, right like that. So now that I have that measured out, I'm going to transfer hands, and then I'm going to move forward about a 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to trim that right like that. So then I want to move that forward. I'm just going to take this, capture that right there. Not a real heavy wrap, which I did on that one, and it really spiraled that stuff out. But I just want to take that and I want to go right back to my hackle and then pull down tight. What that's going to do is flare my wing out, and it flared it a little bit more than I would really like it to be. I don't know, I don't like that too much. I got a little bit too much flare on that, but we'll see if I can correct it as I go forward. Ideally, what you would have for your tie-in point right there, you would be tying in somewhere in that color transition. This is a little bit short for the size of the hook that I'm using, but you would be tying in on that color transition right here would be ending, or would be starting right there, and then the rest of your tail would be going back, or the rest of your wing would be going back. This stuff right here isn't near as hollow as that stuff down at the base. This stuff at the base, as you can see, when you tie that in, it's gonna flare on you. That's what makes this stuff so great for doing deer hair work, is because it is so hollow. you can fluff that out and really get some good designs and everything in there. For this application though, you want to be back at that color break for the start of your wing. I'm just going to let this one ride. I think I pretty much set the expectations on this one that it's not going to win any beauty contest from the very beginning, but want to explain how to make that right, or how to make that look better for you. I mean, this is still going to fish and still going to float, but if you're looking to make those really nice looking stimmies that a lot of folks tie, that's how you would go about that and not catch that portion that's really hollow right there. I was actually able to get that to stand down pretty nice for me, so overall I guess it's not the absolute worst that I could have done, but still pales in comparison to some of that stuff that's out there. So what I'm doing now is just standing down some of these hairs, and I'm also making that taper. So as I get to the front, because that deer hair is compressible, I'm making my wraps tighter, and you can see how that has that taper coming right down there. It's thicker right there and then thinner at the bottom. That's because those thread wraps right there are heavier than these ones here, and it makes that nice little cone going down. So now what I'm going to do is grab a piece of Hackle here. I'm going to grab this off of my older barred ginger, and I might grab this off of my older barred ginger, I don't know, we'll see. Add a piece there that was a little, starting to unravel a little bit. Not really unravel, I just cut it shorter than what my wire trapped it. So I'm going to go with this whiting barred ginger. This is on the longer side. Like I said, that's the stuff that you use on the body is typically going to be on shorter than the Hackle that you use for this front section. And then we're going back to our dubbing here, and once again, just because you've got a thicker portion right there does not mean that you need to use thicker dubbing to cover it up. Use a small rope, same as you always use, selecting the right amount of dubbing, and then take your time and work through it. That's going to give you, the taper's already there. You don't have to do anything with the taper, it's already sitting there. All you need to do is just make nice consistent wraps with even dubbing all the way through. The less dubbing that's on there, the better your fly's going to float. Because what happens when you get those dog legs that are kicking out, that dubbing is going to trap that water, and even, well, I mean, you're really not going to sink this one because of the amount of deer hair that's on there. You're really not going to sink it, but on your regular dry flies, it's going to wind up, because you don't have all that deer hair, it's going to sink a lot quicker no matter how much treatment you put on it. Nice and consistent with the dubbing. Nice and consistent, working that all the way to the eye of the hook. I got right there, I got one little piece of deer hair popping out, which isn't a really big deal. And then I'm going to put that dubbing back in there. I can make another fly some other time. And then I just want to wrap this Hackle. I'm starting right where I left off, or right where I tied in that deer hair, and then nice even wraps all the way to the front. Tie that off with your gel spun, or whichever thread you're using. I like the gel spun, that's my favorite there. And then we're going to make a whip finish right in front of that eye. Trim that, 2, 3. all in all, yeah, I think it'd pass. And then I'm just going to take a little bit, because I have a little bit of white right there in the front. I'm going to take and touch that up. And then we have our finished stimulator. Right there is the finished product. Like I said, a lot of folks will use these for the salmon flies, for the goldens. A lot of folks just use them as straight up attractor patterns, and then they'll drop some nymphs below them, hopper dropper type style. Really versatile pattern, not one that I'm well versed in, but I think we stumbled through it enough. Had a couple places where we had to back up and make the fly right, but that's fly tying. You know, anytime you're doing that, don't be afraid to take the time. Like you see when I was tying that tail in, I wasn't happy with it, it wasn't right. Take the time, go back and do it right. I almost did it on that wing, but I was able to bring that thing around to me. Don't be afraid to stop, look at it and be like, no, it's not right. Go back and do it right. That way you're going to be happy with the finished result, and it's not going to be a fly that just sits in the fly box for, you know, years, because you look at it and you're like, yeah, I ain't going to catch anything. Take the time, do it right, and then, you know, your end result's going to wind up being better. But that is the finished stimulator. If you guys have questions or comments, leave them with me and I'll get back to you. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll catch you next Wednesday.